How much of what you do is actually you, and how much of it is shaped by other people?
If I see somebody else out there singing, la, da, 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 la, la, and everybody gives them status. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn how to sing.
In this episode of the Enriched Mindset Podcast, we explore why we help, why we compete, and how the situation around us influences both. We're joined by Dr. Pat Barclay, a professor at the University of Guelph, whose research blends evolutionary psychology, social behavior, and game theory to understand how people make decisions, because people aren't always consistent.
The evolutionary question is, well, why do I feel that way? Why do I have the capacity to value you? We need others, we need help from others, we cooperate. This is part of our ecological niche.
So if you've ever wondered why people do what they do, this episode is for you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Enriched Mindset Podcast.
I'm Dr. Lee.
And I'm Gracie, a second-year student at the University of Toronto, completing a specialist in cognitive neuroscience, a minor in psychology.
Now, as humans, we often spend a lot of time trying to understand why people do the things they do and how they behave.
Me especially when I'm out at the grocery store and I see someone in the line in front of me round up, or I see someone help another carry groceries out. We like to think people are instinctively good humans.
But those same individuals might act differently if they knew no one was watching, or maybe they have something to gain from the experience.
So this makes us wonder how much of being a good person is about who we are versus the situation we're put in.
And that's what we're going to dive into today.
So today, I'm so excited to share that we are joined by Pat Barclay, a professor at the University of Guelph, whose research explores how humans cooperate, compete, take risks, and how reputation shapes our behavior.
So Pat, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Great. We're here at the University of Guelph. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. We really appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay.
So before we get in, we have a little bit of an icebreaker here. It's a little bit of a dad joke. So I'm going to start.
I am a dad. So
okay.
That'll make
but don't judge me if they're bad. So I'm going to start with mine. It kind of has to do with what you teach. Why does Taylor Swift never lose at game theory?
Why is that?
Because she already has a reputation. Album number 7 is Reputation by Taylor Swift.
Okay, all right.
She has a whole album on it.
I'm going to show my entire uncoolness by not getting any Taylor Swift references. I'm just going to have to shake
off
that one.
They have a course here on Taylor Swift.
Yeah, it was the same way, Pat. So, all right. So it's my turn. Why did the nice guy finish first in the race?
Why is that?
Well, because he sprinted ahead so he could be at the finish line to hand out waters and give high fives.
Oh, my gosh.
That's pretty bad.
Okay, but jokes aside, we want to start with the really big question I think everyone comes back to. Are humans actually good, or are we just really good at looking good?
We're really good at figuring out what pays off. And sometimes it pays off to be good, and sometimes it doesn't. So we have the capacity to go either way. Just some circumstances, some environments are conducive to cooperation and other environments are not. And that's one thing we're really good at.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about evolutionary psychology, we're kind of trying to get at the why in terms of behavior. And this might be a little bit of a strange question, but is it really come down to sex and propagation of genes, like ultimately?
So evolution is going to select for certain desires, certain capacities, abilities to learn. It's going to cause us to value things like sex, food, safety, shelter, friendship, parenthood, love of other people. It's going to select for a lot of those motives. And those motives are what we actually act upon when we're actually out in the real world, right? So on the one hand, if I'm helping you out, right, I'm probably just thinking, hey, you're a great guy. I like you. I'm going to help you out because you need it. But then the evolutionary question is, well, why do I feel that way? Why do I have the capacity to value you? Why would a psychology that makes me more cooperative, why would that be selected for? When would it be selected for? When would it be selected against? So under what circumstances do the nice guys finish first, and under what circumstances do they finish last? And that helps us to understand when people are going to be nice, when people aren't.
Yeah.
So the key distinction here is between the proximate causes, then those are the things going on in our brain, right? The empathy, the valuing others. But then the ultimate question is, well, why are they in our brain? Mm-hmm. Why don't we feel terrible when we help others, right? Why am I not like, aha, I have every opportunity to screw you over. Why do I not value that, right? Why am I not incensed whenever you receive help from me? Because, oh no, I've just paid something, right? Yeah. Why is it instead that I value you and have a genuine desire to help you? And that's the sort of question that we answer.
Right.
Okay, so we kind of have this innate nature in us to help people. We don't exactly understand as people where that comes from, but does that happen to change when we start to put ourselves against others? When we see someone else doing something like donating to charity, say donating a certain sum of money, and then we have the idea, oh, because that person's donating, should I donate? And then we instinctively want to donate more because we want a competitive altruism in a sense.
Okay, so I'm gonna back up a little bit here. In that, to explain this idea of competitive altruism, to first explain why does cooperation pay off? And humans, we need others, right? A lone human is a dead human, is one expression, right? We need others, we need help from others, we cooperate. This is part of our ecological niche, is cooperating with each other to extract resources that are difficult to extract. And we need cooperation. I might come home empty-handed one day with no food. You may have a surplus. You share with me. Tomorrow, you come home empty-handed. I have a surplus, and I help you. So we help each other out this way, and as a result, we both do better off. Right? So you scratch my back, I scratch your back. We both benefit from having our back scratched. If somebody else is really, really selfish and doesn't help others, well, they don't get their back scratched. Right. They don't get their belly full when they come home empty-handed. They are less likely to survive, less likely to reproduce and have kids and pass on their genes for their selfishness. Whereas us who are cooperating, we will survive. We will pass on those genes for cooperativeness. But this does rely on things like others observing, right? If I don't know that you scratched my back, I might not be willing to scratch your back. Mm-hmm. If I think you have not scratched my back, I might say, no, you don't get your back scratched.
Right.
So we're good at making sure that others see our generosity, because that's part of that observation is part of what selects for generosity.
Mm-hmm. And when you're talking, I can't help but think of con artists, people who might engage in performative altruism for an ulterior motive. Is there always kind of an ulterior motive or some other larger plan?
So great question. So I would say most of us are helping because we genuinely value each other. But that does open up a niche for con artists, exactly as you say, to try and present themselves as being cooperative, or maybe for everybody to try and present themselves as a little more cooperative than they actually are. Right? So there is a small niche for that, but we're also good at detecting that, picking up, okay, who is a cheater? Right? You talk a good game, you talk the talk, but do you walk the walk? Right? And if we interact with people often enough, we start to pick up on that and say, you always promise to reciprocate, but you never seem to. You know what? I'm going to stop helping you out. So in small-scale societies, there's lots of opportunity for people to develop a reputation for this person's a good helper, this person is not.
Right.
And the good helpers receive more help. In larger societies, it's harder to know what everybody does. And so maybe there's a little bit more of a niche for the con artist to try and appear nice. They'd get caught in a small-scale society, but in a bigger society where reputation doesn't always follow you, they can get away with it for a certain amount of time.
Right.
Okay, so we speak a bit about con artists there. People putting on this facade, I'm a nice person just to get something out of it, which ties into selfishness. Then we go on the other end. We have like psychopaths, for example. Do they don't have that innate nature to do something good, or when they do, like, because then we have certain psychopaths who are able to, again, be like con artists, lead people in, and then get what they want. But what creates that distinctive difference?
Right. So psychopaths are really interesting because it's kind of and scary because it's kind of the opposite of altruism, right? Most people have some level of empathy, right? If you see me break my leg, you'd be like, "Oh my goodness, oh, are you okay?" Right? A psychopath just, meh, I don't care. So they have no guilt, no empathy about the harms that they cause to others, and to a psychopath, it's just about them. True psychopaths are fairly rare, right? Probably less than 1% of the population, thankfully. But yeah, they don't have that empathy, and as a result, are less likely to cooperate. And there's different theories as to why this might exist. One of which is that there's this small niche for that. Right, it's what we call frequency-dependent selection. Some traits can exist as long as they are rare in the population. As they start to become more common, there starts to be selection against them, right? Because as soon as psychopaths become more common, everybody else gets suspicious. Nobody else is trusting, and the con game doesn't work anymore. Whereas as long as they're low, then that'll cause them to decrease in frequency. But if they get too low, everybody is trusting again, and that creates a small niche for them. So, I'm not saying don't trust. I mean, trust is very important, and that's if you don't trust people, you miss out on a lot of opportunities, right? So trust is good. Just also do beware. Trust but verify, as they say.
Right.
Being smart about it, trusting those who have a good reputation. Whereas if somebody is known for not being so nice, then maybe you don't want to trust them.
I've heard you talk about nice guys and assholes. Like, what's a nice guy?
Okay, so a bit of a loaded question there.
Yeah.
Depending on who you ask, in game theory terms, niceness would be somebody who's willing to cooperate with others. Okay. Someone who will initiate cooperation and who will respond to cooperation with cooperation, right? They're never the first to be selfish. They're never the first to be nasty, right? So in game theoretical terms, that's what niceness is, and there's lots of research showing that basic element pays off, right? Start cooperative, lead with trust. And then cooperate with other cooperators, right? So that for sure pays off. It's started to take on a bit of a colloquial sense where niceness also involves like soft and squishy, right? Being a bit of a pushover, right? Not being assertive, not being dominant, kind of like is this guy attractive? Well, no, but he's nice, right? So in that sense, that kind of niceness might not pay off, right? So the game theory also shows that being too much of a pushover is also bad, right? If you cheat me and I say, oh, that's okay, I'll cooperate again, and you cheat me again, I say, okay, I'll trust you again, right? That doesn't pay off, right? So a certain sense of, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? Eventually I should learn and I should retaliate, right? Like should, not in a moral sense, but in a what pays off sense. So the pushover niceness is not something that pays off unless you have no other options. Right.
So
I'm nice and I'm conciliatory because I'm weak, I have no allies, and if I act too aggressively, everybody else will beat the crap out of me. So that kind of niceness may, the pushover niceness might be a compensatory move by those who don't have other options. But the initial game theoretical sense of niceness of just, I'm cooperative. I'm willing to cooperate with you. You mess with me, I mess back. But if you cooperate with me, I cooperate back. That sort of niceness totally pays.
Oh, I see.
So nice guys who finish first have a reputation to back them that's not a reputation that has to do with getting pushed over and always like kind of being submissive to what's being told of them kind of thing.
Yeah.
You need to have that reputation of screwing people over in a sense, or knowing that you have built trust before and you'll keep that trust as long as it's
a willingness to respond to good behavior with good behavior, but also an unwillingness to be exploited.
Okay.
Right. And that's the difference.
Okay, so going along with like this nice guy theory, and then we have like obviously within game theory, we have cheaters as well.
Yep.
And then we have people who are selfish. Like one of the most fascinating findings is that people will punish cheaters even at this cost to themselves.
Yeah.
But why?
Great question. So there's lots of cases where there's a group cooperating, but there's one person who just doesn't pull their weight, right? Most students understand this idea because they've been in a group project with one person who's just isn't chipping in, yet would still get the same grade, and that's infuriating. Or if you live off campus and you've got a group kitchen. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
It gets messy because people are not wanting to do their dishes, right? So why would people cooperate in that case, even though like everybody kind of suffers the cost of the kitchen getting dirty or the not enough work being done? And one explanation is that people are very willing to punish non-cooperators or free riders, as we call them, people who get a free ride on other people's work. People are very willing to do this, and it does often seem to promote group cooperation, right? If you know that somebody is going to dump your dirty dishes on your pillow if you don't do them, you know what? You might be more willing to do that. I mean, that's maybe a little extreme. We use more subtle things. That generally, we tend to start out with kind of low, just kind of disapproval. If that doesn't work, then we escalate. If that doesn't work, then we escalate further. And the most successful social systems are those that have kind of a gradient of punishment, right? Start with a warning. Start with a fine. Then gradually escalate to higher and higher fines, or stricter punishments for those who don't, follow the rules, who are harming others. But people are very willing to punish. And the question is, why? Why would any individual incur a cost on themselves in order to punish someone else? And there's several reasons for this. One is that they might develop a reputation as a punisher, right? If I'm known to punish all the people who are not doing their part, who aren't chipping in, then whenever any other people come into a group with me, they're going to be like, oh, I better pull my weight. So I might punish you, and I may or may not receive any benefits from it, but I will receive more cooperation from others.
Okay.
Or it could just be, when I punish somebody, I might get, if the group becomes more cooperative, I benefit from that personally. So there can be personal benefits from being the one who ensures that their group is cooperative.
Right. Well, just kind of going back to this nice guy narrative, you kind of hear this in pop culture in the context of attraction and dating.
Yeah.
So I guess number one, is it true that women don't like nice guys? They like bad boys? And if so, how can someone who is maybe their personality is kind of like nice or agreeable, how do they kind of navigate the dating scene?
Right.
Yeah.
So there is this conception that nice guys finish first. And it's because always people contrast, an attractive, dashing, daring bad boy with this soft and squishy altruist, right? And of course you're going to prefer the attractive, handsome, dashing, rich bad boy because he's dashing, daring, attractive, rich. The badness itself is not necessarily attractive.
I see.
It's all of the other traits that might be attractive. So the real question is, if you were to take the exact same person and then add some mention of altruistic behavior, does that make them more attractive or less attractive?
Right.
And this is exactly what our research did, where we created simulated dating ads. And exact same guy, exact same photo, or girl, exact same photo, just mentioning some things, and I volunteer at the group home, right? Or, I enjoy helping other people, right? And that small mention does provide a boost to their attractiveness for long-term relationships, right? So these are traits that helpfulness might be a signal of, I am a good person. I am going to be a cooperator. And romantic relationships are about cooperation. Right? Like, the number of weddings I've been to where people are like, it's like I'm marrying my best friend, right? Like it is long-term cooperation.
Yeah.
With sex, but it is also the cooperation in a long-term relationship, and by signaling I am a cooperator, I'm valuable in a long-term relationship, that can provide a boost to somebody's desirability for a long-term relationship.
Right.
It's not going to suddenly turn them into Casanova, right? Like it's our small boost. The way I put it as an analogy, the effect was like, imagine that a person's overall attractiveness were something like IQ, right? With like a mean of 100 and standard deviation of 15 or whatever. This small mention of helpfulness gives you a boost of a few attractiveness quotient points.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's not going to suddenly turn you into the romantic equivalent of Einstein, but it makes you slightly more desirable than you would have been without that niceness.
Right.
Okay. So certain unattractive traits have almost in a way been able to escape evolution, and they've been able to make our way into society because they're shielded by some attractive features or someone looking and acting like Prince Charming at certain times, but on the inside, true at heart, they're not necessarily Prince Charming.
Or some people can get away with being a bit nastier because they have other desirable traits.
Okay.
Right? So if you're really, really attractive, people in however you define attractiveness, whether it's personality, whether it's physical attractiveness, whether it's your social skills, how funny you are, if you have desirable traits, people are going to want to associate with you, right? Even if you're not a total angel. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have those other desirable traits, you'd better be nice. Otherwise, nobody's going to want to associate with you.
Right.
So as a result, the people who have these other desirable traits, they can afford to be not as nice.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the people who are, not funny, not attractive, not socially skilled, they'd better be nice. Otherwise, they're going to have no friends, and they're getting no nookie. Right. So you've got to have it's like a compensatory strategy.
I've heard people say that they want their from a maybe female perspective, they want their partner to have the potential to be a jerk or dangerous, but they regulate themselves, or they treat them really nicely but treat others poorly, and they feel more special. They don't want someone who's just like a nice passive person. Is there something to that, like the contrast? Or
people value a number of traits, and they like to divide it into competence and warmth, right? Or ability to provide benefits for others and willingness to provide benefits, right? Same thing, different name. And so competence is very much valued. Warmth would be like the empathy, the niceness, the altruism, but competence too. So yeah, women are going to want a competent boyfriend, right? I would argue men are going to want a competent girlfriend as well, right? It goes both ways. Like, we want competent friends.
Yeah.
We want competent allies, competent coworkers. And so people are going to try and signal those traits, and people are going to choose based on those traits. So like the ideal partner is somebody who is very competent, but also very warm towards you, willing to provide benefits, willing to help. Right, so the dashing, who's the main love interest in your typical romance novel? Right, he's some high status, assertive, socially dominant individual who's got a lot of high status, right? Is able to provide lots and lots of benefits, but is for whatever reason totally committed to the female protagonist, right? Possibly because he's a jerk at the start, but he comes around and in the end, and now he's devoted to her. But it's that combination of competence and warmth towards you.
Right.
Is what people value.
So almost in a sense, when we're picking our relationships, we're picking our partners, we're kind of selfish in the sense we want someone who's warm towards us, but not necessarily towards anyone else. And does this happen to have like a situational dependence? Like in a certain situation, am I going to be more attracted to someone else than in another situation?
Great question. So yes, we do want people who are nice towards us, but we can use how they interact with others as a cue of how they're going to behave towards us. There's an old saying which I love, which is, a person who is nice to you but is rude to the waiter is not a nice person,
Okay.
right? That suggests that, okay, they're not always going to be nice to you, right? There might be something nasty, some selfishness underlying that, and you might not be able to trust them to be always nice to you. As soon as things start to go bad, they might abandon you, right? So yes, we do value those who are nice to us, but we do use how people treat others as an indication of how they might treat us in the future.
Okay.
Right. So these are all cues. So that's the first part of your question. Second part of your question was, do we value different traits at different times? And the answer is absolutely yes. Right. So who do you pick for your basketball team versus for your math team, right? These are different skills. So obviously, we're going to pick different people for those things. Are you working at a task that requires competence? Well, you're going to pick people who are competent in that domain. Are you instead looking for a really trustworthy situation? Like you need somebody to, watch your kids or something like that. Or you need somebody to here, hang on to my wallet while I go swimming. Don't take any money out, right? You need somebody trustworthy. So you're going to select, in one case, you're going to select for, physical competence, social competence. In the other case, you're going to select for trustworthiness.
Right.
So that totally matters. But even in romantic relationships, right, are people choosing a long-term partner or are they choosing a one-night stand, right? People's preferences are going to be different there because some traits like niceness, they're only valuable in the long run, right? Do they benefit you on the night of? Maybe not. Whereas physical attractiveness matters for that. Whereas, if you're choosing for a long-term relationship, people might just start to value the character more because that pays off in the long run.
Now, just shifting gears a bit, are there little conundrums where evolutionary psychology doesn't have a clear explanation? Like just things that come to mind to me are for example, people who decide to become celibate, or if your parent prefers your friend over their own kid, where it kind of goes against this idea of you're trying to kind of propagate your genes or acquire resources for your own kind of in-group.
Right. So great question. I can answer kind of each of those in turn. Yeah. One is the choosing to have kids. So a lot of people are doing this, but in many cases it's couples who are choosing not to have kids. But I'll bet they're probably not choosing not to have sex. Now, in a world before effective contraceptives, sex leads to kids, right? So, we evolved to have a desire for sex. And, before contraception, two people would get together, they're in love with each other, they're having sex, they're going to have kids, right? So that choice of not having kids wasn't as present. Now, we've managed to break the link between sex and kids. We can have all the sex we want and have no kids. We can also have kids without sex, right? In vitro fertilization, et cetera, right? So these mechanisms that might have been adaptive in the past might not be now. Right. So that's part of it. There are many other factors as well, right? Other the cues, is this environment conducive to having kids, right? People might be picking up on some of that and saying, okay, no, now is not a good time, and just kind of internalize that. So there's a number of reasons for that. We're still working this out, including why has much of the developed world gone through the demographic transition, where we're not having as many kids as we could, right? We could be having kids every 9 months from when we're 13, right, up until whenever menopause is. But nobody on the planet does that, right? There's always some spacing in between kids, and stopping to reproduce at some point. And some of the theories around that are to do with quality-quantity trade-offs. If you had a kid every 9 months, or heck, every 6 months, have a preemie every 6 months, right? Or every 3 months, why not, right? Yeah. Those kids wouldn't survive, right? Or, they would survive, but they wouldn't be socially successful because you haven't been able to invest enough in them, in their well-being, their physical well-being, their social well-being, make sure that they're high enough status to be able to find a kid, right? And so people may be making these quality-quantity trade-offs, and instead of having 30 kids over their lifespan, each of whom has a small probability of surviving and reproducing, they're instead deciding to focus on, 2 or 3 really solid, high-quality kids who are going to do well and are going to be competitive in today's society.
Okay, yeah. So in a sense, like we go back to, if you think about epigenetics, like we were trying to breed for like the best of the best. We were trying to combine people only with like the best traits and the best stuff. And now we talk about only wanting to have kids when we know that they can be the best person they can be. Does that best person include being a good person? Is that the ultimate hierarchy? Is we want to be a good person?
Well, we all want to do well in the world, right? To have to be viewed well by others, right? Because people who are viewed poorly, all else being equal, they don't thrive as well, right? They don't have as many kids, right? Somebody who's constantly on the out, right? So we have these desires to be seen well, to have status, or at least, if not top, at least somewhere, not be way down at the bottom of the status hierarchy. And we realize that we if we need to cooperate, if others value cooperation, then we can't be that much of a jerk. Otherwise, we will get devalued. We will get ostracized. And so we'd better have some degree of niceness. We might even benefit from being nicer than others, competing to be the nicest. I can provide the most benefits for you. Right, you can imagine this, especially within like courtship, right? Okay, he might like you this much, but I care for you even more than that, right? Like, as long as it's not obsessively so, so we do value cooperation in our friends and allies and our romantic partners as well.
So even someone lower, say on the status, if they believe truly at heart that they are better and they're a good person compared to someone who's super rich, owns all these buildings, are they innately going to be happier? Or
that's a great question.
Is it a kind of a tie between status is low but they're happy?
Well, happiness is going to be affected by a whole bunch of things, right? And it kind of sounds like you're asking, does money buy happiness? Right? Complex question here. So different people are going to differ, and they're based on level of attractiveness. To a certain extent, money can buy things like time, like security, right? Like if you're constantly scrounging for your next meal, you're not sure if you're going to be kicked out and you're going to be living on the street tomorrow, right? You're constantly worried for your safety because you live in a horrible place, right? It's harder to be happy when you have those constant stressors in your life, right? So in that sense, money can buy, food security. Money can buy you, a stable place to rent, right? Or buy if you have enough money. Money can get you into a better neighborhood, right? So you don't have those constant fears. So it's not going to buy you happiness per se, but it buys freedom from many stressors. One friend of mine once described it as there are many problems that you can just throw money at, and that's part of the reason. Now the question is, are mega millionaires and billionaires, are they happier than the average person? That is a different question. I don't know the data on that one.
Right.
But certainly down the difference between desperation and lower class is a big difference. The difference between lower class and middle class, that money can buy some other things, but also but of course money isn't the only component of social status. Somebody might be very rich, but everybody hates them, right? That's a stressor too. Somebody might be poor, but is very, very popular, right? And everybody values them. Everybody wants to help them, right? So that is something else. We are happier when we are viewed positively by our peers. So people who are liked, people listen to them and respect them, that's going to make us happy. It's triggering those pleasure buttons, right? That is one of the pleasure buttons we evolved to have, is to be well-liked and valued by our peers. Right. And that's not the same as money.
Yeah.
Okay. One last question before we jump into our little game segment here. We didn't always, did we always in evolutionary psych value money on such like a high standard? Or was there a time that there was something else that kind of replaced that whole like money?
Well,
you know
money didn't always exist.
Exactly.
So obviously, there was a time when we didn't value it. How much we value money is going to depend on how much do you need money, right? If you're in a society where money doesn't buy you much more stuff, then we're not going to value money. We're not going to care as much about partners who have money, right? Whereas if you're in an environment where some people are starving on the streets and some people are in mansions, right? In that environment, if you have a choice between starving on the street with somebody or living in a mansion with somebody, you're going to value money more, right? So, in our society is more egalitarian than many others, right? Not to say that it's totally egalitarian. There are many inequities that currently exist, but there are many societies where the inequities are much, much higher. And you'd predict that in those environments, people are going to value money and status more because the differences in status are much greater, and money and status buys you much more in those societies than it does here. And we have an experiment showing that, if you present people with a bunch of potential partners, some of whom vary, they can either vary widely in how much money they have and not very much in their generosity, or they all have about the same amount of money, but they vary greatly in generosity. Some are really fair, really great people, and some are stingy as hell.
Okay.
In the environment where everybody's more or less the same generous but highly unequal wealth, people they want to know about people's wealth. They value wealth more in that environment. But in the environment where everybody is about equally wealthy and some people are nice and some people are utter jerks, in that environment we value the generosity more. And we don't care as much about the wealth.
And then in family-oriented cultures, when someone has a bigger family, they're seen as richer because that's in sense that's their money. Having a bigger family means you're happier, means you're in a sense wealthier. Not that you have more money, but that's just what they value.
It may go the other way.
And
in that the more money you have, the more kids you can afford to have, the more kids that you can successfully raise. Such that they leave the nest, right, in animal behavior terms.
So it's not necessarily a sense of, yes, money wasn't present in our world and now it's a main attribute for everyone. It's a sense of, in different perspectives, in different situations, we have different things we value more.
Yeah. I think humans have always valued status, but status takes different forms in different places, right? In some places, it's who's the best hunter. Because that's how you make your living. In others, it's just who commands the most respect, right? Some people make good decisions. They're intelligent enough and social enough to be able to, others listen because they make good decisions, right? And that's a form of status. In other places, people have more access to resources, right? Which is ultimately what money is, and that is a form of status. So money is just one form of status, and other forms exist in different places or even within our society and can have different importance in different circumstances.
Alrighty.
When you think about evolutionary psychology, we were talking about things like resources, status, scarcity. What's your thought on, let's say, society socially engineering things so that they're kind of reducing those impulses, not having people in competitive environments or trying to have let's say a basic income, et cetera. Are these good? Are these good things, or are we kind of in denial about?
Well, people from all schools of thought have tried to do social engineering and utopias, right? So people often like to pit evolutionary psychology against behaviorism, right, which is all about reinforcement, and B.F. Skinner. Well, B.F. Skinner wrote a utopia, and it was all about social engineering people based on reinforcement, right, to reinforce behaviors that are socially nice and not reinforce behaviors that are nasty. So people have thought about this from all sorts of perspectives, right? People who are hardcore into believing in nurture, like B.F. Skinner, wanted to socially engineer to create a utopia. People that were hardcore into nature, like the eugenicists, right? Tried to socially engineer a utopia, right? So people have wanted to do this from all perspectives. And as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So you do have to be very careful when social engineering about what are the unanticipated consequences, right? So for the record, I am all in favor of changing the incentives for things, right? So rather than having a world where selfishness pays off and it pays to be the meanest, nastiest person out there, no, like let's create a world where cooperation pays off, where those who help others receive, like get recognition for that, and others trust them. Right, I think that can be good, but there are always cautions about using these incentives. And the most famous example of this is a daycare study in Israel, where they decided to they didn't want parents coming to pick up their kids late, and so they decided to start imposing a fine for people to pick up their kids late. You would think, okay, now if there's a fine, people are going to pick up their kids on time. But the lateness got worse. And the reason is because now, like, a fine is a price. It's signaling, okay, you can pick up your kids late as long as you're willing to pay the fine. And many parents were like, yeah, that's worth it. Like, this is the other thing I need to do. Okay, yeah, sure, you hang on to my kids for a little longer and I'm happy to pay the fine. Right? Whereas before, it relied on, a reputation for being a good person. You're not screwing over the daycare workers. You're not forcing them to work late by being selfish and showing up late, right? And so before, it relied on that, whether you want to call it social norms, whether you want to call it a reputation for a nice person, it relied on that. But as soon as you introduce the monetary incentives, now this is no longer a signal of my good behavior. Now I can happily just pay them to do it. And so the lateness got worse. And so the moral of that story was a fine has to be, big enough to be effective, or don't bother. Or don't do it. Yeah. Or don't do it. Yeah. And I think that's a valuable lesson for anybody wanting to do social engineering is make sure you're aware of what the unanticipated consequences might be, but also test it out. Yeah. Right? First and foremost, I'm always a push for experimentally testing to see what's going to happen, right? So rather than rolling this policy out across all daycares in the entire province, maybe we test it out at a couple to see if it works. Right. If it works there, then we think about rolling it out more generally. Or an educational policy, right? You want to change what the curriculum is in order to see if this improves kids' learning. Okay, rather than rolling out across the whole province, do a few tests in a few places to see if it works, because it might not, and you might make things worse, and you always have to test that stuff out.
What's your take on things like participation awards versus having winners and losers, like
okay,
kind of thing?
So good question. When there's one winner and only a single winner, on the one hand, it's a big incentive to be that winner. But on the other hand, there's no value in being second or third or fourth or whatever. So you end up getting extreme investment in just that one thing, but also you might get more nasty behavior, right? Because people being more willing to cheat in order to be that one. They might compromise themselves in other ways, whether it's compromise their morals, compromise their body by taking steroids in order to achieve that one winner-take-all position. Yeah. Right? If there can be only one and there are huge gains for it, then people will sacrifice a lot for that. But instead, if second place also gets a lot, third place also gets a decent amount of recognition, then people might not be willing to sacrifice as much in order to bump themselves up one notch. And so that can often be better. So that way, everybody participates, and especially down those who are, in an athletic competition, say for example, less athletic, right? We don't necessarily. We want all kids to be out there getting exercise, being physical, doing these sort of things. And if you only reward the best in the class, then everybody else in the class learns, I might as well just sit on the couch. Instead, if everybody gets a participation award as long as they participate, then that encourages everybody to get off the couch. But it does rely that if somebody stays on the couch, they don't get the participation awards. So if you give it to absolutely everybody, that doesn't help. If you give it to only people who meet the certain standard, who actually do participate, then it'll work. Right. Same thing like if everybody gets a passing grade, even if they don't show up to class, then a lot of people are not going to show up, right? Whereas if you say you've got to do the minimum amount of work in order to pass, then that will motivate people to do that.
Because I think the criticism is like it's creating this false sense of esteem, and then when people go out into the quote unquote real world where it's much more vicious, they're just kind of in for a shock. So.
Yeah. I'm not advocating that we tell everybody that they're an amazing baseball player and they can make the major leagues. Right. But what I am saying is, hey, maybe we should encourage everybody to get out there and play baseball for the fun of it, or whatever your run or whatever your activity is, or anybody do some math, right? Even if you're not going to win the Fields Medal, right? Like learn that 2 + 2 = 4.
Right.
And just get everybody to meet some standard, and not to say that they're the best in the world for doing so. We do need to be somewhat realistic, but at least give incentives to do things that are valued.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talk about participation, setting that standard. You meet that standard, you get that participation award. But what does this say about kids, especially in classes where there's this project? It's not optional, but you have to do a minimum amount to get a grade. What does it say about the kids who all of a sudden go above and beyond, knowing they're still getting that same mark as everyone else who does the bare minimum? Like, what does that come from?
Well, again, not saying that there should be no distinctions between pass and fail, or participated and not participated, right? There can be some incentives higher up, right, in order to do well, to actually go beyond the bare minimum.
Okay.
Right. So you want to reward the bare minimum, but you want to reward more than the bare minimum as well.
You want 2 sets of standards for people to shoot for, almost in a sense.
Yes. So I guess it's a bit of a false dichotomy to say either it's a winner take all, or everybody gets a medal.
Right.
No. There's many other types of curve, right? Like, maybe the winner, in a class of, say there's 10 people, right? Instead of the winner gets 100%, everybody else gets 0. That's a winner take all. Or you can give everybody 10%. That's like everybody gets a medal. You could do everybody who participates splits the 100% equally. Right. In which case, if, 5 people participate and 5 don't, those 5 get 20% each. Or you can do like winner gets 30%, second place gets 20%, third place gets 10%. Everybody else who participates splits the other 40%.
Okay.
Right. So everybody has some incentive, and there are incentives to do slightly better. But you're still including everybody who is trying to be included.
Okay, so you talked a bit about reputation there. Obviously, we care what people think of us.
Yes.
Obviously, we want to have a good reputation. We're going to show you a couple clips now. Some of them, 2 of them, have to do with social experiments.
Yep.
It kind of has to do with eyes being on you. How do you act when eyes are on you? How do you act when you're put in a certain situation?
Generally, people act nicer when there's eyes on, like across the board. Just about every domain that has been studied. Yeah, people are nicer when others are watching, unless they're already nice. That's the difference, right? So some studies find, people aren't any nicer when others are watching. It's like, that's because they're already really nice, right? So like it's in psychology is what we call a ceiling effect. You're already at the ceiling. You can't go any higher.
You can't get nicer.
You can't get nicer than that, right? Or realistically, without being, abnormally altruistic.
Yeah. Right. And then we've got one video that kind of it deviates away a little bit away from you, and it goes more towards how we act when we are treated a certain way, how someone else makes us feel. We'll kind of expand on that, see if we can branch it to evolutionary psych. But I'll show you the first 2 here.
Okay.
So the first one, we're going to have the elevator one. We'll see.
That is Nadia. She is an innocent passerby. Has nothing to do with this. Everybody else in that elevator, they all work for Would You Fall For That. They're all in on the experiment. They're all purposefully facing the wrong way. We're playing this to you in real time, no editing, as it actually happened. Okay, floor 2. Rebecca gets off. Emily gets on. She also works for us. We're swapping people in and out to reinforce the behavior. Emily's acting like it's the most normal. Oh, Nadia's turned. Nadia, her bag is slipping off her shoulder. She's nervous.
Perfect. So as we can see here, Nadia in the video, it takes her just one floor just to turn around when she sees someone else turned around in the same way, knowing instinctively, whenever we're in an elevator, we usually face the doors. But why does she do that?
Okay, so the couple of reasons. I mean, the reason everybody gives is conformity, right? I mean, there's also things like hey, personal space right here in an elevator. If you're at the back and somebody turns around and face the back and they're right
their
there,
breath in your
oh,
face.
you know what? That's awkward. I'm going to turn around, right? So this particular example, there may be other factors going on,
Yes.
but the reason people generally give is conformity, right? We tend to do what other people do, right? And because it sometimes looks a little weird if we don't, right? There are these kind of expectations of what people do. Now, the question is, why are there these norms, right? Why do people follow norms? Now, in some cases, it makes sense to follow norms, right? So the one thing that humans are really good at is learning from others. This is our specialty. This is something we do better than any other species on the planet, is to learn from others. This is how we develop tools. This is how we know what to hunt, how to hunt. This is how we know what plants to eat and what plants will kill us, what plants will heal our wounds, what plants to use to poison the river to catch the fish, right? Which some people do. As a result, we tend to imitate what others do. And so there's informational value in what others do, right? If I see you rubbing two sticks together that way and it lights a fire, I mean, I should do it that way instead of what I'm doing, right? This includes what behaviors are socially successful. So if I see one person, flexing their muscles and everybody else is like, and that person gains social status for that, then I'm going to be like, oh, that's how to gain social status around here.
Okay.
Yeah. If I see somebody else like out there singing, la da 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 da, and whoa, everybody gives them status, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn how to sing, right? Like, so we imitate. In a land, if everybody were to walk around singing constantly like a musical, we would quickly join in and be like, oh, this is how to achieve social status here. This is how to not be on the outs with everybody else.
Right.
So in some people's eyes, like say kids that all of a sudden they start deviating towards that like bad teenager phase or whatever, they start hanging around like the wrong crowd. It's because in their eyes, that's where the social status comes from. When someone behaves like is a misfit, like that's how they gain social status. And that's why even though they know like socially it's not acceptable to like swear at your teacher, to do various stuff within school that could get you expelled, because it can gain them social status with a certain group, that's what makes it valuable to them?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Who is? It's always status in the eyes of whom.
Okay.
Is what matters, right? So when you're a small child, status in the eyes of your parents matters a lot. As you get into your teenage years, status in the eyes of other teenagers matters, right? Not necessarily the adults. When you are an adult, status in the eyes of other adults, and you have to learn how to play well with other adults. Yeah. So that's always the question: status in the eyes of whom, right? And of course, there's sometimes some interesting conflicts between what'll gain you status in the eyes of your buddies or your girlfriends or whatever versus what's going to gain you status in terms of the opposite sex or whoever it is you're attracted to, right? So people will sometimes do things that might lower their status to their buddies or their gals, but gain them the attention of the opposite sex. And sometimes people will also encourage their others to do things that lower their attractiveness to the opposite sex, right? As a means of kind of eliminating them from the competition.
Okay. And for our second video here, just to go back to that social performance.
Yeah.
Like we obviously, here I'll explain it kind of as it's going. We have a woman who she's dressed in casual business wear and she falls.
Yep.
Everyone's very quick to go and help her up. Everyone's kind of gaining together too, because this is kind of social conformity again. And now when she changes clothes,
how will people react now?
Is this social conformity again because no one's going to help her?
So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in here.
Yeah.
One is the concept of who is a valuable partner, right? And people will value some individuals more than others. Is this right? Is this just? Arguably not. People do it. And if they feel that somebody is high status and a potentially valuable partner, well, if I scratch that person's back,
They'll scratch mine.
I want that person to scratch my back. And I'm not suggesting anybody is thinking this, right? Instead, we tend to like certain people more than others, right? And cues of social status are one of those things that we like. Like we are more willing to do things for people we like our friends, our family. High status people are one of those. Somebody who is low status, what are the potential benefits from that? Not as much. What are the potential costs? People might think maybe there's more costs for doing so. And that's going to affect their willingness to help as well.
Do you think that willingness could help if there was a big crowd around when she was dressed differently? If a big crowd started to form, do you think more people would kind of social conform and join that crowd? Or do you think it's still dependent on that status? We don't see value in them, so we're not going to go.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what we estimate will help people out. I mean, imagine it were a member of the hated out group, right? And they fall down, right? Are you going to get status from helping out like the evil enemy? No. So people are going to be less likely to do this. I mean, this is why, like, the parable of the Good Samaritan is so powerful, right? The classic story: the guy's walking to another village, gets beaten up by robbers, left for dead. Priest passing by doesn't help. Merchant, whatever, passing by doesn't help. Who does help? The Samaritan. Who are the Samaritans? They're the out group. They're the people that that Jesus and his friends hated. And here's this hated member of the out group who comes and helps and does the wonderful things that the priest and the merchant or whoever it is don't do. Like, that's what makes that much more valuable, like much more inspiring, right? So because that's something that people don't typically do, it's hard enough to get people to help members of their in-group, let alone members of the out-group, or somebody who we feel doesn't deserve help, right? People will invent all of these reasons to not help somebody. Oh, they didn't deserve it. Maybe they were drunk, right? We invent these rationalizations to justify our behavior. That's sort of like, the PR module in the brain trying to excuse, like, I'm not a bad person for not helping them. There was a good reason for me not helping. But we're more likely to generate those excuses if the cost-benefit ratio works against helping.
Right.
Whereas if the cost-benefit ratio suggests this person is potentially valuable, everybody else seems to value that person enough that I will gain status for helping. There, the benefits seem much more apparent, and we will generate justifications for why we should help.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, just kind of bouncing off that, is it possibly like a test of your genuine altruism if you're able to, let's say, donate or give without anyone knowing how much you gave? You're not talking about it. It's not a public thing. Is that kind of like, if I'm able to do that actually it's coming from a good place? I'm not going to tell a living soul about it.
I would certainly trust that more than I would trust somebody who broadcasts it.
Right.
Right. To drop another biblical reference here, right? Like, when you're giving, do not make a big show of it, right? Let the left hand not know what the right hand is doing, right? Like, so there are all these exhortations to try and be good for the sake of being good, not for the reputation. If you think about somebody who's broadcasting it to everybody, people start to ask, wait a second. Like, are they doing this because they genuinely care? Or are they doing this for the reputation?
Right.
So we are skeptical of other people's motives, right? And from a signaling perspective, that makes a lot of sense, right? The more potential benefits a person could get from broadcasting this behavior, the more incentive there is to be a con artist about them. Whereas if somebody helps in a circumstance where they didn't expect to be observed, yet they get caught being nice.
Right.
That is a sign of that person probably is genuinely good, and will trust it. You should therefore trust that more.
You have a couple of biblical references, but I was thinking about during COVID when people were donating to or tithing. They would maybe do it like electronically, but I'm wondering if that actually decreased donations, because before you'd have to kind of pass around this plate and everyone would kind of see if you're actually putting something in or not.
When donations tend to be higher when they are non-anonymous, right? When they are observed, right? So the fact that people are donating anonymously is great and is wonderful. But observation tends to increase niceness, right? People are getting more being more generous. And it's in some cases it might be because people can gain a good reputation for giving, or maybe it's to avoid a reputation for stinginess. Right? Everybody else just gave $20 there. Okay, well, I guess I better, otherwise now I look like a jerk. Right? So generosity is a funny thing because there is an element of relativity. Right? Like tipping is a classic example. If I tip if I tip 10%, I look really generous in a place where people barely tip at all. But I look really stingy in a place where people tip 15 to 20%. Right? So that same level of generosity is going to be seen positively or negatively depending upon what everybody else is doing. And that's what kind of creates this competition for relative generosity, relative niceness, competitive altruism, if you will.
And what's your take on, let's say, a charitable organization using research to kind of manipulate certain kind of social situations, or let's say they're purposely hiring maybe someone who's like physically attractive because they know from their research it's going to probably lead to more donations. Is that ethical practice, or is that a fair game?
I'm not an ethicist. I can tell you what works,
right?
But not what is morally right.
Right.
What I will, I'll quote some B.F. Skinner here. The idea that we are always affecting each other's behavior in ways that we don't intend, right? So he gives the example of when a baby cries and its mother feeds it, right? On the one hand, that mother is, changing the baby's behavior, learning, okay, if you're hungry, cry and let me know, and I will alleviate your hunger. But at the exact same time, that baby, that newborn baby, most helpless thing in humanity, is equally controlling its mother's behavior. Because when she feeds it, it stops crying. And that makes her more likely to feed it in the future. Right. So it is controlling her behavior just as much as she is controlling its behavior. Right? We are influencing each other in a lot of ways that we don't intend.
Right.
And so B.F. Skinner argued that we should do this in ways that promote the common good. Right? If you have to have someone presenting this, okay, why not use somebody who's going to be more effective at accomplishing the common good? Is what he might argue. And I guarantee you, people who are using these principles for bad purposes are already doing so, right? The propagandists are aware of all of this. Right, the people who are trying to manipulate us to buy stuff that we don't need, to gamble in casinos, right, to go to war against other countries, right, to cut people off who need it. They're aware of all this and they're already using it. So some people would argue, if you have to have somebody presenting it, or you have to word this some way, why not word it in a way that promotes good behavior? Of course, what people define as good behavior varies greatly, from place to place, and some people would define things as good that we would find horrific. But I don't know what the alternative is. The alternative is just to wander around blindly and not even try to improve our social situation.
So you talk a little bit there about the common good. We always want to do what we can. Like if we need to put an attractive person in a situation where we know they could collect more charity money, we know they could promote the common good. What happens when the common good is kind of gray amongst like a diversity of different cultures? Per se, organ donation. There's certain companies that use researchers to see which lines, which slogans, which events will help people convince them to put on that driver's license, I'm an organ donor.
Yep.
Is that ethically right to kind of sway people from their personal belief, especially if they have a personal belief that they shouldn't donate their organs, or they should? If we have the research behind it, is that ethically or morally wrong?
So
is it a common?
Again, I'm not an ethicist here. I can tell you what works. I'm not saying what is right or wrong. What I will say is, in that particular example, so there's this concept of nudging, right? Where we change kind of the decision structure a little bit, it's designed around helping people make decisions that they probably would do anyway, right?
Okay.
Like where people are like, oh yeah, I should donate my organs, but a lot of people just don't get around to doing so. So in that case, you know what? Let's just change it so that instead of you have to like fill out this form and mail it in, how about when you get your license, you have to decide there, yes or no, like where a non-decision is not an option, right? Because people's default is just the laziness to not do stuff. So you could say the default is you're an organ donor unless you opt out. Right? People still have total freedom of choice. People who, if they believe this goes against their personal beliefs, their religion, they're free to opt out. They just have to do so, right? Or you could say the default is okay, you don't donate. In which case, only the people who are motivated and actually have their stuff together are going to go out and do this. Or you say there is no default. You must actively make a choice. That will increase the rate of organ donation. But also it will help people to do the behaviors that they want to do. Yeah. They have stated they want to donate their organs. They just haven't gotten around to doing so. Right. And it can be the same thing with other things like, contributing to one's pension plan for retirement. Everybody's like, yeah, I know I need to do this. Oh, I haven't gotten around to doing that yet. Right? To be like, okay, you know what? You're automatically opted in. You can choose to opt out if you want. That's fine. Yeah. But you have to you have to actively make that choice, right? And to help people to do what they naturally want to do. Yeah. So, I would shoot back the question: is it unethical to help people make decisions that they have already indicated they want to do?
Right.
People would be much less hesitant about that, right? Is it unethical to trick people into doing something they didn't want to do? Most of us would agree, yes. But is it unethical to help people make, to actually go ahead and implement their preferences? Many people would say no.
Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation. Can you just tell our audience what you're currently working on?
So we're working on a lot of things. So I'm working on how people come to have a vested interest in others' well-being, right? Where I benefit from you doing what you do, and so I now have an interest in helping you to make sure that you are well able to do that. I'm also looking at how people signal their willingness to cooperate with others, right? So many behaviors that we do, whether it's whether it's public donations, whether it's public charity, whether it's in-group behavior, right? Look, I am wearing my gang colors, which means I am going to cooperate with members of my gang. It can be a signal of cooperativeness towards that specific group. But even things like partisanship, like the extent to which I insult the other group, right? Is that a signal of my commitment to my group? Maybe it is, right? So how many of these behaviors are ways of communicating our willingness to cooperate? But more generally, how are we communicating both our competence, our ability to be a good partner, but also our warmth, our willingness to be a good partner, and our willingness to help others? What are the various cues that we do? Is religiosity, religion, and ritual, is this a way of communicating I am a good cooperator with my in-group? To what extent is Puritanism, right? Like I am denying myself, these pleasures of the flesh, right? Is that a signal of I can resist the temptation to be selfish and I will cooperate with you, right? So these are all possible ways to communicate our cooperativeness, and so I'm kind of looking at all of those.
That's amazing. And if our listeners wanted to follow up with those, touch on them, where could they find? Just wait till it's published, or do you have a site? Do you LinkedIn that you update?
Yep. So, if you look me up, Pat Barclay, so patbarclay.com. I do have a website. All of my publications are there. Nice. So they can find on that. I've also got links to a couple of talks that I've given that have been recorded. I did an interview on evolutionary psychology, the podcast. People can listen to that as well.
Yeah, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. I also didn't know you were such a great singer. But I can see why you're one of the most popular professors here at the University of Guelph. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you
very
very
much. Hope our
much.
audience enjoyed our conversation, and we'll see you next time on the Enriched Mindset Podcast.